So welcome again. This is really this is our monthly Expert Connect session that we do here for the Marketing Help. And what we like to do is focus on bringing one expert in one specific area of a marketing career, and really just open up the conversation, pick their brain, have them share some experiences, learnings, tips. But then the back half of this conversation, we want to open up to everyone here to answer your questions. So as your questions are being formed, developed, note them down. Maybe if you want to pop them into the chat so you don't forget them. But we'll address the AMA kind of Q&A session towards the second half of this session. So let's start by welcoming our guest. We'll welcome all of you for joining. Thank you very much. And welcome our guest, Gerry McGoldrick. So Gerry, let's kick off the session here. For those that don't know you, I think most people have some familiarity with you, but for those that don't know you, quick introduction on yourself, but then let's jump right into having you talk through here. We're talking about careers in marketing management. Talk about the teams, the type of teams, the size of teams that you've managed over your career.
Okay. Yeah, Gerry McGoldrick, and I've been in marketing for, 25, 30 years. I've managed Jess and Ben know that I work at just to kind of keep compliant. I work at a life sciences company, not to be named, but you can easily find out right now. And I have a team of about 60 people, which is made up of full-time employees as well as contractors. And I manage the digital channel strategy and services group, which is comprised of web strategy and services, emerging digital channels, digital publishing, marketing automation, SEO, a platform called Quality Resource Portal, and I think that's it. And before that, I'm new to the life sciences world. I've only been here about a year and a half, and but before that, I was in e-commerce and startups, and before that, in the agency world. So, started life in traditional marketing and advertising, and then went digital in 1998, where I met Eric a couple of years later. And Eric and I had our own SEM company. And then after we were acquired by another agency, we then both went to a company called GSI Commerce, which was the back-end platform for about 120 brands like the NFL. It's now a lot of it is is now Fanatics, if you've heard of them. And then I went into the startup world, both in e-commerce, ad tech, things like that. So I've met, and then now most recently was at a startup in the dental space, and before that was in a startup in the pet space. So I've managed teams anywhere from, I think, it's at the high point, I think at GSI, we had about 150 people on the team, and as little as 2 people. And a lot, I would say that, there's not a lot of difference between, how you manage those teams, because if you do it right, you never really should have, like when it was 150 people, we had what I would call a spider matrix, where I had a level of directors and VPs, and then they had managers and supervisors. So it kind of went, down from there. And so I really, and that's one of the things, that you should really never have more than like 6 to 8 direct reports. If you start having more, then you need to break up your organization. But I've also, in startups, I've been the sole marketer, and then, had a team of 2. I've grown teams from, 6 to 20. The team that I have now was about 17 when I started. And now, like I said, is close to 60. So some of that came over from when I got a new role last summer. But really, the key to managing teams of any size is really you have to be vested and committed. Meaning that you can't just sort of, what I what bothers me when I look at some people, folks who are managers, is they're like, well, I'm the boss, so I don't have to do anything. And I'm not saying, you always have to roll up your sleeves and get into the day to day and stuff, but you need to be vested that you're aware of what's going on with the people that work with you, so that you can help them, right? And at this point, a lot of my job, and has been that way for a while. I started managing people, it's probably in the mid 90s. I was just telling someone, not to be arrogant, but it is something that kind of comes easy to me, because I don't have I'm a film major, right? I didn't go to, business school or anything like that. So I didn't learn the textbook way of managing people. I just my philosophy is you treat people fairly, and you're transparent and you're direct, right? So I've had to, have some tough conversations. And I would say that's, if you want to talk about one of the traits that you should possess if you want to manage people, you really have to be willing to have those conversations. Because even at a team from 2, I had to be like, hey, you're not pulling your weight. You need to do this, that, and the other thing. And so always coming with solutions. I've had people that I've had to manage out of an organization, but they've, I don't know why you're laughing, Eric. It wasn't you. I ended up helping them get another role, because I recognized that they weren't the right fit for the role. It wasn't that they were not smart. It wasn't that they weren't talented. They just weren't the right fit for the role they were in, or the organization that we were in at the time. And so a few of those folks went on to have great careers in other places, but it just wasn't where they were at that time wasn't the right fit, and it was tough. Nobody ever wants to hear that they're not doing well, and no one wants to hear that they're losing their job. But what I've always found is that being direct with people, and I know there's a couple people on the phone that worked with me in the past. I tell it like it is, and I think that's really important, because I don't like surprises. I know people don't like surprises. For example, the review process, right? I'm not a big. I'm sorry, Eric. You have a question?
I was going to say a lot of good backdrop here, but want to chip away at a lot of the things you've been putting on the table here, which are good topics. Want to treat them and be able to go deeper in some of those topics you were talking about.
Okay.
But how about we start, from what you've seen or what you're seeing when it comes to roles in marketing management, you look for, the next 12 months, and what are some of the trends that, if you're going to be a manager of marketers, what are some of the trends that you need to be aware of? Because like you're saying, some things will never change, but what is something or things that are changing from what you see in the landscape managing marketers now?
What I've seen, it's a change in the managing or marketing managers and managing marketers, because the people that are becoming marketers are changing, right? The makeup, the personality, right? So back when I started, I had a lot of bad bosses. I learned from them, right? But that was sort of like, you kind of had to suck it up, because that was sort of the way it was then, right? Today, you have to be very empathetic, right? And you have to understand that the world is different, and you really need to get to know the person a little bit, and know that they might have outside outside forces that may be affecting their performance. And so what I see as a trend is, if you want to today, being a boss is not good enough anymore. You really need to be an ally, right? And an advocate. And that's what the big change that I've seen is that the good managers now, they know that, and they do that, because it's not about, if someone's not doing well, it's not about defending them and making excuses for them. It's digging into the reasons why, right? So I'm a big fan of this book called Good to Great. I talk about it a lot, and it's one of the big things is about not just getting people on the bus, but getting them in the right seats, right? and and people can be on the bus. They may just not be in the right seat, but if you don't talk to them and you're not willing to like be open and work with them to figure out why, so, you know, that's important, the why, right? Most people, when you dig into it, like it's not their performance. If it's not good performance, there's usually something else going on, right? They're either not happy where they are, they're not in a role that they want to be in. They may have some issues, like I said, outside of work that's going on. And it's you have to be aware of all these things because you know, the workforce today is a lot more vocal than the workforce that I started in, where people just kind of like took it. And so you have to be able to understand everything about the person and really be, like I said before, vested in helping them improve. And I don't think a lot of people do that. I think people get written off too quickly. And what I've done, what I've been able to do is, and like I said, it's like 85, 90% of the time when someone's having an issue, you can work with them and you can improve them. And I think that's a trend that I'm seeing more of, because people are coming up through the ranks. And I'll say that because there was this time, right, when I came into the industry, you sort of worked your way up to the ranks. So by the time you got to be the manager, you knew what it was like to sit in that seat. And then the .com thing happened, right? And all of a sudden you had all these like very young CEOs and CFOs and COOs who had never sat in the seat that their employees did. And so they had no idea what it was like to be that person and go through what they did. And I think that has gone away. And you see a lot, like, while there's still those instances, I think in most organizations, people are coming in and starting with organizations like the Marketing Help, right? Where you're helping people get in the door and then they work their way up. And so when the time they get to be a manager, they've sat in that seat and they have empathy for what that person's going through.
Got it. So speaking of that, so I know there's some attendees here that may be in a position where they're ready to start managing people. Or maybe, you know, they could be getting started in marketing. And the question here is, what do you think is the best path for someone to take so that they become prepared to take that management role of a marketing team? Is it start with an agency so you learn all the seats, so to speak, so you can progress? Or is it in-house with a client team or brand side where you can understand the business acumen aspect of it, which could prepare you better for a leadership position? I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious on your.
I think it's both. Yeah, I don't think you can do either, right? I think it's more about, first of all, like, be careful what you wish for, right? Like, managing people is not a picnic. You know, it's, you know, in the role I'm in now, you know, I have a lot of very passionate, dedicated people on the team, and that makes them very, they're very open to just coming in and telling you what everyone else, what you're doing wrong, what other people are doing wrong, and what all that kind of stuff, right? And a lot of times you have to weed through all that, but you spend a lot of time, you know, working with people, and you know, so I would say, when I was thinking about this after you and Jed sent me the questions, you know, there's two paths that you can take to move up. I think people think in order to move up in today's world, you have to become a manager of people. You don't have to be a manager of people. And what I'm doing at my current place is I'm creating I'm trying to create a path where people are subject matter experts. They move up within their discipline, right? As opposed to managing people, because not everybody's cut out to be a manager. I worked with somebody back in the early 90s or the early 2000s who was a brilliant numbers person, analytics person, right? Horrible people person, right? And, you know, when he wasn't under me, they gave him a group of people because he was a really good analytics person, and they all quit because he wasn't cut out to be a manager. And they're like, well, something's wrong. And I'm like, yeah. And in the, I know like this may not come off right, but I basically like, dude, I think we should just stick you in this corner and you just do your thing and you don't have to deal with people. And he was like, thank you. Like, I don't want to. And ever since then, it's been like, like not everybody's cut out to be a manager of people, but you can be a manager. You can manage a channel, right? You can manage, metrics, all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to be that. So you have to decide: are you really? Is managing people really something you want to do, or do you want to manage something besides people? Because you can do that, and I think that that's really important. Because managing people, like I said, not an easy job. But if that's the path you want to take, you have to be willing to not be the smartest guy in the room. And I think that's a mistake that people make, is that you need to be open. Like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. What I always did was surround myself with the smartest people in the room, right? I was never afraid to hire people better than me, smarter than me, right? Because we all just made everybody better. And another thing is you have to be able to assess the different talents of everybody. And you have to learn that you can't manage everybody the same. Eric is a good example of that, as a matter of fact, right? I didn't manage him the same way I managed other people when we worked together, say at GSI, because Eric didn't need all that attention that other people needed. So I just remember being at another digital agency and someone coming in and saying, well, you favor this person because you're always talking to them. And I'm like, right, because they're not as good as you right now. And I'm trying to get them to be that way. So I have to spend that time with them. So I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like
all good points. And I'm sure it's good fodder for questions that are brewing right now. But the one thing to think about, or I guess the one other question to that, is for somebody who wants to become a manager and they realize that it's on their roadmap for the year, let's say, what are some things they could be doing right now to prepare themselves, or I should say prepare the perception of their current manager so that they feel that they are 100% ready for getting that promotion, whether it's internal or external somewhere else? What can somebody be working on to be prepared?
So they can communicate. I would say communication is key, right? If that's what you want to do, let it be known to your manager that this is the path you want to take. I think a lot of people sit back and just expect it, right? And you're not always going to know that. And if you have a good manager, they'll help you get there. And I was just, kind of listening to a little bit of the Tim Clark podcast that was recently on the Marketing Help. And he talked about, which is, a great point, that if you want a certain job, you need to start auditioning for it now, right? And you need to be showing those attributes. You don't, everyone is like, well, I'm only going to do this job and I won't do that job until I get that job. That's not the way to look at it. You should start doing that job now. You should start, making suggestions on how your manager could manage the team better, or things, or help people out, right? If you see somebody struggling, we always had, I think you would remember, Eric and Jed, this whole no man left behind mentality at GSI. Like I always said, if you're going to get up and leave and someone's still there, and then you get up the next night and someone's still there, ask them if they need help, right? That shows that you have that empathy, you have that willingness to help people beside yourself, because being a manager is not about you. It's about the people that are on your team. And so putting yourself out there now, I would also say just to read up on some psychology. Management is a lot about psychology. And I was a psychology minor, and it's really helped me. I've always been interested in how people react and behave. And it really has helped me I'm not saying go back to school and minor in psychology, but there are, start reading about how people, the behavior of people and being able to recognize that. And I think that's something that's helped me, is being able to recognize certain behaviors and what they mean, because they don't always mean what it may look like on the surface.
Now, for the marketer that's preparing to interview for that management role, what's the one tip you can give them so that they are as prepared as possible, or give a stellar performance?
I would say asking what the management style is of your boss. Can sometimes, or be the person hiring you, or the person, if that's not if you're interviewing with the person that's not the hiring manager, then find out what that is. I think that question always impresses me, because it says, like, I want to make sure that this is the right opportunity for me, as well as the right opportunity for you. I also think that you need to be able to talk about your past experience and how it relates to the job that you're going to be going, this management job, and bring up examples of how you've already been doing the job, right? And I think if you think about it, you'll be surprised about that there are things that you may not have looked at as a management role, or you may not have been in a management role. But if you think about everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, whether that's jumping in when somebody else needs help, or raising your hand when there's a project, all that shows that you're more on the selfless side than the selfish side, because it's really managing people is a selfless role, because you have to really put yourself aside, and if you do that, you're only going to make, if you have a high performing team that you manage really well, that all the other stuff's going to come to you as a manager. But you have to really be willing to put the time in. But I would say really go in well prepared. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but as someone who interviews a lot of people, I'm always surprised, like, and I've been, in my current position, I've been interviewing people at all levels, and I find that some of the people with less tenure in the industry are better prepared than some of the older, who just kind of think they're going to get the job based on their resume, right?
Right.
And something you had said earlier, right, about like your resume gets you the interview, right, but you got to get the job.
That's right.
So I do listen and read your stuff, Eric.
There'll be a quiz later. Now, let me ask a question, kind of tied to what you're just saying there. So flipping the conversation to, you're interviewing a lot of people. So when you've interviewed candidates for roles that were going to be managing people, what do you look for? Because you already gave some insights on what the candidate should be preparing to do. But on the other side, if you're the person who's hiring for that marketing manager, what are you looking for?
It sounds like a cliche, but a telltale sign is when people say I instead of we. Mm-hmm. When you ask them about their accomplishments and they talk about, well, I did this and I did that, and then they think that that's impressing you, that that you've done everything. And again, it's about the we, right? Like give the team credit that you worked with, right? Don't try to take all the credit yourself, because first of all, well, I've been around a block, so I know how things work, and I know that you're not doing this all by yourself, right? And so if you come in and you're like I, it's like, okay, that person is only out for themselves, and they're not going to be a good manager of people. I think another attribute that I look for is really is their kind of demeanor, right? I give them questions that are tough, right? One of them used to be, what kind of music do you listen to? And they would be like, well, everything except for, I love all music except for country and rap. And I'd go, oh, I love country and rap. And I'd watch how they react to that, right? Like, and if they were like, oh, like, and to me that like, but more times than not, that answer would tell me that person is not forthright. They're not really on it, because the people that are like, I like metal, you know, or I like death metal or whatever, right? Like they would have that conversation, like they were being true to themselves. And that's really, I think that genuineness is really what's important, because I've worked with many people, and I know Jed, and you know some of these folks that were just kind of so superficial, and you know they came in and their job was to make themselves look great, not make the team look great. And I really feel like this. My job is to make my team look like rock stars.
So the other question when it comes to managing marketers, and I think we've had this discussion countless times when we used to work together, but what is your perspective on the difference between a manager and a leader? And do you need to be a manager to be a leader? Do you need to be a leader to be a manager? Can they be separate?
I think a leader needs to be willing to put themselves out there, right? And take the bullets, right? Take the hits. You can be a good manager without being a good leader. I've worked with, many people who, were great at managing their team, but were not great at going and sort of and not putting themselves out there and be willing to be the person that sticks their head up, and with the possibility that you might get knocked back down. And I think that's one of the courage, I guess I would call that, right? I think the difference between a manager and a leader is a leader needs to have courage, and not be afraid to disrupt and say things that may not be the status quo. So,
got it. So, all good stuff. I'm sure that there's a lot of points you shared here, tips you shared here, that are going to fuel some of the questions that are coming. So let's transition here into, open the door for conversation or for questions coming from those attending. So if you have them, pop them into chat. Let me check if there's any in chat yet. If not,
you made it like there was like 20.
What's that?
You made it sound like there was 20 questions waiting in the chat.
They're coming. So a couple questions just to kick it off, just to warm it up, and we had questions come in from our community for folks that couldn't make it. So I want to make sure those get answered too. So talk more about this, knowing if you have the right members on your marketing team. Now, I know in your case, you've done both. You've built teams from the bottom up, and you've inherited teams. So let's talk about when you inherit a team as a marketing manager. What do you do to assess to ensure you have the right people on the bus, or sure enough in the right seat?
Well, I meet with them and I ask them what they enjoy about their work, how it aligns to what they ultimately want to do. What do they ultimately want to do? Tell me what you enjoy most about your work, and what are the biggest challenges about your work, right? And what I'm really looking for is, I believe you need to have, and what I do is then you write all that down, right? And then you look across your team and you say, does this team complement each other? Because somebody may not be good at this, but good at that. And then somebody else might not be good at that, but good at this, right? And so I've always kind of built teams that way, where, having folks with varying levels of skills and different expertise, because I feel like that brings out the best in everybody. And one of the top things I look for is dedication and commitment. I don't want people to look at this as a job. I want them to look at it. I prefer people who look at this as a career. And it's important to them. And I'm not saying it's the most important thing in their life, but it matters, because they're the people that are going to take what you want to do and take it to the next level. If you have, and there's ways to like look at that, right? Just through those questions that I ask, is that, like, are they sitting back in their chair? Are they sitting forward? Being, can you see excitement in their eyes when they're talking to you about it? Are they being genuine? Because I don't personally like to work with people who aren't as invested in the success of what we're trying to do as everybody else.
Okay.
Right. So
Got it.
yeah.
So we have a question in chat if you want to read through that one. Can you see the chat?
Yes.
Or
click.
If not, I can read it out loud.
Why don't you read out loud so everyone can hear?
Okay. So
was it from Meg? Does Meg have audio?
Yeah, Meg, if you want to pop on audio.
Hi.
Hello, Meg.
Hi, Meg.
Hi. Is it easier for me to just ask it?
Sure.
Okay. So yeah, my question was, I've been in marketing for like 14 years now, and just the path that I've taken has been mostly small companies. So it's usually been like myself and a manager. My most, not this role, but the role right before that, I was there for 6.5 years and it was just the two of us. So there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for management. So I kind of talked to my manager about, I need management experience if I want to move up. So I worked at a university. So we got some student workers under me. So I had like a little bit, but now I'm kind of in a role where I'm back, like I'm in a sales marketing combo role. And I don't really think that I'm in a place where that opportunity would exist in my current role. So I guess what I'm asking is, how do you recommend going about like addressing that on the application? That's like, if I wanted to apply for a management position, and it requires X number of years experience, you know, I managed a student worker or two, but that may or may not.
No, like that counts, right? I wouldn't, put any less credence in that than managing, full-time people like analysts or coordinators or whatever. Because a lot of times managing interns or student workers is actually harder sometimes, right? Because you have to always keep them motivated, right? Because they're going to go back, right? For more times than not, they have to give an evaluation of you, right? So a lot of times if you come in and you get a team of like 5 people that have already been there, you have the review process, obviously, but like that evaluation comes back to you in more real time than if that. And so I think that experience is very valuable. And again, what I would do is highlight how you worked with them and what they accomplished, right? While they were under you. What issues and challenges did they have, and how did you help them overcome those issues and challenges? But I think I wasn't sure if your question is, do you not put that on the application, or you do put that on the application, or how you sort of position it?
I guess it was more around like the positioning of it. Like if it was a resume situation, like I feel like if you just have a bullet point that says that, but yeah.
But I would put, and then you say, as a manager, the team was able to accomplish this, and the team had some challenges, had these challenges, and this is how I addressed them. Perfectly fine to put that on a resume, I think. Definitely an application.
Cool, thank you.
Sure.
And it also may influence, Meg, the types of roles you go after. If every role you're looking for is looking for somebody that has experience managing a team, must manage at least 5 direct reports. Well, maybe there's another role that is more focused on managing the skill, like you've been doing, allow you to get into that role and then transition, almost like get yourself into the system, so to speak, so that you can transition and get more of that hands-on experience managing more people in that company. I know it may not exist in every company, but that could be a way if you're looking to transition into a company where you have more opportunity to gain more management people experience.
I think you can also, back to your other, I think you can also position how you work with other groups, right? That's part of managing, right? So they're not always your direct reports, but it's really about how you work with people. So highlighting that, right? And that experience about, I collaborated with these folks. We developed this together, all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't always have to be, I managed 3 people. It'd be like, I didn't have any direct reports, but I had stakeholders that I managed, or I had other teams that didn't report directly to me, but I was leading the project that they worked on, and this is how I handled that. So it doesn't always have to be direct reports.
That makes sense.
And I'm sure, Meg, you maybe have managed some vendors or partners.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Vendors, and then just like right now I'm at an agency, so there's a lot of managing of things.
And vendors can be some of your best references, and that's why I always like when I started out in the business, in the media as a media buyer, I was like, oh, your vendors are your enemy. You got to beat them up. And I took a different tack where I treated them as partners, and they ended up getting me a few of the good jobs that I was able to get because they were my references. And they were the people introducing me to the person hiring. And so having that great relationship, because that's what it's about. Like managing people is a lot about relationship building. You have to have that relationship with people, and you have to be able to, both parties have to put themselves out there. So I agree. I think vendor management, cross-functional team management all falls under that.
Cool. All right, Benjamin, you've got a question. And if you have audio that's functioning, would you mind popping on your audio and asking your question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. What are your thoughts on seeing people with formal backgrounds in scientific functions of the company who then move into the marketing side of the company? What type of learning curves do you see, and obstacles do they need to overcome to be successful in this side of the business? Talking about scientific people, no formal training in business.
No, well, it depends on what you mean. Are you talking more about analytical type people or more like biologic type people? Because
biologic type of people.
Okay, yeah. So what I would say is that, that experience to me would be very relevant because especially if you're working within the same company, you have that, what's marketing's job? It's to market the products that you were developing when you're on the other side, right? And so I think that is how you position that, is that you would be able to bring out the attributes of the product that maybe somebody in marketing doesn't, right? And because it's really easy to just sit there and kind of read something that the scientists put out and then come up with some fancy jargon or whatever. But what we found in my current role is that what the customers want is they want the facts, right? They want to know. They're not looking for the quote that always comes through is, I'm tired of the happy couple running across the wheat field holding hands, right? Like, tell me what are the facts that I need to know, right? And I think that having that background and being on that side of the business would be a very advantageous, and not just in from science. Let's take science out of it, right? It's basically your product development, right? And you're going from product development to product marketing, right? And so I think there's a lot of value in that, and how you would position it is that you're going to bring a new spin to the messaging, right? And that, you've done, I'm sure, like from the science side, I would say, to the marketing side, the science side is probably done, in the product development side has done as much, if not a lot of the same research that has been done on the marketing side. And so that includes, so you're going to is there going to be a learning curve? Yeah, sure. But I don't think it's insurmountable because you have that background already of knowing what the product is. And it's all about, and in today's world, it's not necessarily, there's not like a lot of new tricks and stuff to try, right? It's really just learning the channels, which honestly, we're all using anyway, right? In our personal lives, right? So I don't think there would be, that much of a learning curve. There's a learning curve everywhere, right? In anything you do. But you're basically saying, like, I've been developing this. Now I want to go talk about it and promote it. And, because I know how great it is. And I think that's how you would position it. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
Thought there is also that if I'm that person who's moving from scientific into marketing, I'm listing out all the transferable skills I have from what I've learned on that side that would port over into a marketing context. Doesn't mean you need to know all the channels, because remember, all marketing skills can be learned.
Right.
But the transferable traits and skills you have that are powerful from the scientific into the marketing is what I would document. All right, Meg, you've got another good question.
Okay, so my question is for, like, when you do get into the managing role, how do you balance, like, wanting to keep in the loop and, like, make sure your people know that you trust them and value them, but not be a micromanager, because that's, like, the one thing I never want to be, but also just feel like you kind of have a pulse on what's going on. So
I think, again, it's communication, right? But I think, like, one-on-ones are very undervalued, right? People think that they don't, people can take a couple different paths. Like, people say, this is your meeting, you make it about whatever you want it to be. And when you do that, a lot of times you get like, well, I'm heading out this weekend and I'm going to do, like, okay. But really, like, so you can break the meeting up into two, right? And it's like, you kind of get and we've actually been told that, especially in the remote world, like, have that personal connection first, where you do talk about how are you doing? Are you doing okay? What did you do this weekend? And make that personal connection. And then you move into, which I think makes total sense in this remote world that a lot of us are living in. But I think the next thing is just how you position is, give me, like, the 3 things you're working on, right? And any obstacles or challenges that I can help you with, right? That's really what people are looking for, is they're looking for you to help them get over a certain hump that they may be encountering. And so, and that way you're getting the information that you're aware of what they're doing, but you're also giving back to them, and that you're sending the message that you care and you are there to help them and be an advocate for them.
that's good feedback. Thank you.
And then when I see the word trust you have in your question, something that I've kept in mind when inheriting teams, especially, is trust doesn't happen the first day. Definition of trust is time plus truth. So it's going to take some time, but you're going to need to give some honest and have some honest conversations and feedback wrapped in the vulnerability that is necessary so that you can start building that trust both ways. But as a manager, you want to do it first, because you can't expect your team to come to you and be completely vulnerable and ready to trust you. So you kind of need to initiate that. And the one book I recommend every manager, first-time manager, to read is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And inside that book are learnings and structure to keep in mind. Even the 5 dysfunctions you need to focus on as a team, so that you build it in a foundation of trust. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to lead off with trust, but I mean, I think that's again, to your point, it's something that you don't have right away. But trust is a huge component of it, and that comes through proving. I've inherited a few teams, and you walk in and the first thing is like, their stage is like, yeah, another new guy, or yeah, we've already done all that. Like, what, like, don't come in here and tell us we're doing everything wrong. And then you just have to just slowly, don't try to change everything in the first go round. You learn, you listen, you learn, you listen more, you learn more. And then you start slowly making changes that can be measured, and you can show them the effect that you're having. And it's not about their way is wrong and your way is right. It's about a better way.
I mean, I can tell you straight up, Meg, that my first managing of people in a marketing team, I was a micromanager. And I never thought I was a micromanager until someone pointed it out. And I was like, oh, you mean it's not supposed to be that way? And it was completely damaging to the team. And it took me time to kind of unbundle myself from making sure everything was done the way I wanted it to be done.
Mhm.
And it was a learning experience. And it took time for me to be comfortable trusting somebody to do it the way that they've been taught and not have to follow across all 5 steps, but just give them objectives and say, hey, this has to be done by this date. I don't care how you do it, just get it done. And when you get to that level, that's when the team starts to trust you, because you're not creeping in on every step of the process. You're being trusted to get your work done. Let them cook. Let your team cook.
So I want to back up a little bit, because 2 things just occurred to me, that just some earlier questions about what to do to prepare and what traits. Delegation is one of the hardest things that people have to learn when they move from being a contributor to a manager, right? They don't want to give up that control. That's where trust comes in, right? But it's the number one thing that people struggle with. The other thing is when you're going from being someone's manager, someone's colleague, to someone's manager, people struggle with that a lot. And so when you're preparing for it, you have to kind of think about, all right, if I get this job and I'm now managing someone that used to be my peer, how is that dynamic going to change? And it could take just sort of separating yourself from that situation and establishing yourself as the manager, as the leader. But those 2 things are probably 2 of the biggest stumbling blocks that I see new managers struggle with. Is delegation, like not having to be the person to do everything, and then the other one again is separating themselves from peer versus now manager.
Which means you don't get to go to every happy hour anymore.
Right.
So Jessica,
I once said to somebody like, oh, nobody invites me to happy hour anymore, back when we had happy hours.
Yeah.
And the guy said, that's a good sign.
Right. So Jessica, you've got a good question here.
Yeah, hey guys. So I feel that somebody who wants to go into management should have like a certain set of experiences before that. And to give more background, I'm a senior in college, and a lot of people, so I study business administration and biology, and a lot of my friends are management majors and they're going straight into managerial roles. But sometimes I feel like a lot of like good managers just have a solid set of experience to come from. And I also really like the idea of empathy and being a leader. But what experiences can kind of promote specifically empathy for that concept?
So here's what I've told all people on my team that had this track and they wanted to be a manager, whether it's with the agency we were at or a different agency in their career. I told them to go volunteer to be a coach for any kid's sports team. And you don't have to win every game, but if you can go through the experience of what it's like to herd cats that are 8, 9, 10 years old, and parents and different voices, and have everything scheduled on time. If you can manage all of that and get that experience, that is a great way to see if you have, it isn't a pass fail thing, but it is a way to understand, do I have the capabilities of being empathetic to someone who, wants more playing time, or deal with an angry parent that translates to an angry client when they come to you asking for the sun, moon, and stars, and you can't do anything. How do you deal with that? So that could be a thing to consider at this stage of your career, just to, get some reps dealing with all those nuances and skills, dealing with chaos and people.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
I don't know, Gerry, if there's any other traits or experiences.
I thought this was my show. I didn't know you were going to be joining in with answers to. No, but I would say if you're not sports oriented, that volunteering at other places is also, it's a great point that Eric made. And also if you're early in your career, like, don't be afraid to show what you did in high school. I have 2 daughters. They're 26 and 24. They're out in the working world, and they both worked at a place on the Ocean City Boardwalk called called Monkey Bread. and they ended up, becoming very responsible. Like they would, they're 15 years old and they're opening the store and closing the store and bringing money to the bank and all that kind of stuff, just to show how responsible they were. So when they got certain number of jobs under their belt, I was like, I think we can take monkey bread off the resume. And they're like, no. They're like, first of all, it's a conversation starter, because people are like, what is monkey bread? And then that conversation turned into everything they did. And they ended up talking more about monkey bread than they did about the internships they did in college. And so all experience is relevant, to Eric's point, right? It's not just work experience. It's what you do outside of it. You could be the captain of a team, or the leader of a choral group or whatever. Anything that shows those kinds of qualities, it doesn't always have to be something you did at a job, or a professional job, if you will. It's life experience. That's what I would say is, I think that's what the point that Eric's making, is that all that life experience can really add up to, but I will just caveat that there are people out there who will just look for that. Oh, okay, like you manage 4 people, now I want you to manage 4 people. Okay. But yeah, and I would just say that if that's the kind of, that's the take the path they're taking, it might not be a right position for you.
That's really helpful. Thank you, guys.
Oh,
Right.
Thanks, Jess.
Other questions? Some good ones
Eric,
here.
I have one.
Fire.
Can I just say something? Can
Yeah.
I just, before you talk? I just feel like there's some disclosure, like, so Jess interned for me last summer. Thank you for joining. And we just sort of, announced that we are bringing her on in a full-time role when she's, part-time before she graduates. And I can just say that, like, she did all the right things, right? In terms of, and she is somebody that I can see has manager potential. And she didn't manage anybody when she was, with us last summer, but she managed projects, and she managed projects really, really well. And she worked across, she's, however old, 21, 22 years old at the time. And she was able to work across a huge organization. And really, like, I think, we talk about, one thing that that we talk about a lot is managing without authority, right? Or influencing without authority, I'm sorry. And that's the sign of a good manager, somebody who can influence people without necessarily having the title or the experience to do so. And I think, and I just wanted to say that because it is a little odd that Jess is asking me questions and she's starting to work for me in a couple of weeks. But but that, it just dawned on me when you were talking, Jess, that like, and when she went out to look for a job, she contacted me and her manager that managed her at Merck and a couple other people, and kept in touch with us and really worked it. And she went after a lot of roles that she didn't get. And she kept at it. And finally, we were able to, something was able to happen. And so that's it. Really, tenacity is something, right? So I think, that you're a great example of somebody who has demonstrated future management potential just in a 3 or 4 month stint at our company. So
Thank you so much. That's so sweet.
Sure.
Definitely wouldn't have been like easy or like possible. And it wasn't easy, but like coming onto the team, like with Matt and with Jen and Sean and you, like it just, like all you guys just had like such a solid team to begin with, that like coming into that made it simple.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well,
Congrats.
it's only going to get harder, Jess. So
Buckle up.
I'm ready.
So Jed, you had a question.
Yeah, and just looking at the time, I mean, this might be our last one. I don't know, Eric, if you had a bookend question or anything, but so Gerry, I've had a lot of great managers. I've also met some of the best managers I've ever met in my career were not in marketing; they were in other functions. And so I guess something that is just interesting to me is do you think that there's anything about being a marketer that gives you an advantage or a disadvantage in being a good manager?
I would say that yes, I do, because I think in marketing you are taught to be a little bit more well-rounded in terms of your thinking, right? And you're not told to go down one path and one path only. You're sort of trained to explore many options. And I think that open-mindedness does make marketing people better managers. To your point, I've had many bosses, and now that you're saying it, I can I'm kind of putting them all in categories. And, I reported to finance people, I reported to legal people, and I will say that they weren't the best, right? They sort of had this very narrow-minded look of what a feel or view of what a manager was or a boss was, right? Like I would say there's that difference between boss and manager. And I think that back to the first question, the trend I see is that people are becoming more managers than bosses. And people, that's what they want. Employees want more of a manager than a boss. And I think that marketing people are probably more equipped for that because of the way we're trained to be a more open-minded and free thinking.
Really interesting. And bonus points for bringing it all the way back around to the beginning.
Oh, thanks, man. And thanks for saying that you've worked with some really good bosses. I really appreciate it.
Some really good ones.
I know you're talking about Spangler, but anyway.
So we're almost at time. Is there any one quick question? Anybody has a lightning round question for Gerry as we wrap? If not, so Gerry, I'll just say, hey, if anyone's interested in continuing the conversation or have other questions that come up, feel free to connect with you on LinkedIn, right?
Yep.
So want to thank everybody for joining here, and just want to remind everyone of a couple of things. One, this Expert Connect, these sessions happen monthly. And because you've joined this one, you're already inside of our community where you'll be notified for the next one. The second thing is, because you've joined this session, you have access to a ton of other resources that could help you as you navigate your various streams of marketing career paths. So again, it's all accessible to all of you. So, enjoy the resources that are at your disposal, and also feel free to reach out to myself or to Jed with any questions you have about the content you see there. But would love to see everyone here in a future Expert Connect session. Keep an eye out, because we're working on our guests or experts in the future. Maybe we may have Gerry back for a follow-up session in the future. So
my numbers weren't as good as the last time, so I think I might have to. I may not be back.
It's all good. It's all good. So want to thank everyone for your time and for your participation and questions. And looking forward to connecting with you guys inside.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Gerry.
Yeah.
Good night.
Right. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Yeah.